My name is Thaddeus Merritt, and I am 70 years old. I'm sitting here in my study, looking out at the garden that my late wife Constance and I planted together 35 years ago. And I've decided it's time to tell you a story. It's a story about loss, about loneliness, about fear, and ultimately about finding love when you least expect it, and when you're most afraid to reach for it. This is a story about what happens when life gives you a second chance at love after 60, when your bones ache a little more each morning, when you've already lived what you thought was your great love story, and when the idea of opening your heart again feels both thrilling and terrifying. It's about the particular challenges of dating at an age when the world seems designed for younger people, when your children look at you with concern or amusement, when you wonder if it's too late, if you're too old, if you've forgotten how to be someone's beloved. But most importantly, this is a story about courage, the kind of courage it takes to believe that your story isn't over, that there are still chapters to be written, still mornings to wake up next to someone who makes you laugh, still hands to hold as the sun sets. So let me take you back to where it all began. 3 years after Constance passed away, when I was 67 years old and convinced that the romantic part of my life had closed like a book returned to the shelf. The house was too quiet. That's what I remember most about those first years after Constance died. Not the obvious silence, the absence of her voice, her laughter, the way she hummed while cooking. No, it was the deeper quiet. The one that settles into the walls and floorboards. The silence that comes when a home that was built for two becomes a shelter for one. Constance and I had been married for 42 years when pancreatic cancer took her. 42 years of shared breakfasts and whispered conversations in the dark. Of arguments about whose turn it was to take out the trash and wordless reconciliations over cups of tea. 42 years of building a life, raising 2 children, Marcus and Delphine, and slowly, imperceptibly, becoming so intertwined that I didn't know where I ended and she began. When she died, I didn't just lose my wife. I lost my context, my purpose, the mirror in which I saw myself most clearly. The first 2 years were survival. I moved through the motions, making coffee, reading the newspaper, tending the garden, attending my grandchildren's soccer games and piano recitals. I smiled when expected, laughed at appropriate moments, assured everyone, my children, my friends, my doctor, that I was doing fine and taking things day by day. But I wasn't fine. I was disappearing, one quiet evening at a time. By the 3rd year, my daughter Delphine had begun to worry. She'd inherited her mother's perceptiveness and her inability to let things go unspoken. "Dad," she said one Sunday afternoon, setting down her coffee cup with a determination I recognized. "We need to talk." I was 67 years old. I'd run a successful architectural firm for 30 years, raised 2 children, traveled to 4 continents, and survived the death of my wife. But when my 40-year-old daughter used that tone, I still felt like a child got with his hand in the cookie jar. "About what?" I asked, though I knew. I'd been dreading this conversation. "About you, about Mom, about the fact that you're still alive, Dad, but you're not really living." I looked down at my hands, age-spotted and trembling slightly. "When had they started doing that?" "I'm living just fine, Delphine. You're existing. There's a difference." She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. "Mom wouldn't want this for you." The mention of Constance made my chest tighten. "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't tell me what your mother would have wanted." But Delphine wasn't deterred. She never was. "Mom made me promise," she said, and her eyes filled with tears. "Before she died, when you weren't in the room, she made me promise to make sure you didn't just stop. She said you had a tendency to retreat into yourself, to disappear into your work or your garden or your books. She made me promise to push you back into the world. I felt something crack open inside my chest. She said that? She said a lot of things. She said you were the kindest man she'd ever known, that you deserved to be loved and to love again, that she couldn't bear the thought of you being alone for the next 20 or 30 years. I'm not alone. I have you and Marcus and the grandchildren. You know what I mean, Dad. I did know, and I hated that she was right. I'm 67 years old, Delphine. I don't know how to date. I didn't even really date when I was young. I met your mother at a friend's wedding when I was 25, and that was it. One woman for my entire adult life. I don't know how to do this, and I'm not sure I want to learn. Nobody knows how to do it, she said gently. Not at any age. But you're still here, Dad. You're still healthy, still sharp, still handsome. I'm an old man. You're distinguished. There's a difference. She pulled out her phone. I've been doing some research. There are dating sites specifically for people over 60. There are activities, groups, classes. Absolutely not, I said firmly. I'm not joining a dating site. That's no, just no. But Delphine had inherited her mother's stubbornness along with her perceptiveness. She didn't push that day, but she planted the seed. And over the following weeks, it began to grow despite my resistance. It started small. Marcus, my son, suggested I join a book club at the local library. Just to get out of the house, Dad, he said. To talk to people who aren't family. I went, reluctantly, and found myself in a room with 12 other people, most of them women, most of them around my age or older. We were discussing a novel about World War II, and I'd actually read it, so I had thoughts to contribute. Afterward, a woman named Geraldine invited me to get coffee with a few of the others. She was 72, sharp as a tack, with white hair cut short and laugh lines that suggested a life well lived. First time at book club? She asked as we walked to the nearby cafe. Yes, my children insisted I needed to get out more. She laughed. Mine too. They treat us like prisoners who need recreation time, don't they? Over coffee, I learned that Geraldine had been widowed 5 years earlier, that she had 3 children and 7 grandchildren, that she'd been a high school English teacher for 35 years. She didn't flirt with me, and I was grateful for that. But she was easy to talk to, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt like a person again, not just a ghost moving through rooms. As we said goodbye, she touched my arm lightly. There's a painting class on Thursday mornings at the community center, she said, for seniors. I go sometimes. You should come. It's terrible. We're all awful, but it's fun. I surprised myself by showing up that Thursday. The instructor was a woman in her 40s named Rita, who had endless patience for our collective incompetence. I sat next to Geraldine, and we attempted to paint a bowl of fruit. My apple looked like a misshapen potato, and her grapes resembled purple marbles that had been melted in the sun. We're terrible at this, I whispered. Absolutely dreadful, she agreed, grinning. Same time next week? Maybe. But I kept going, and slowly, week by week, I began to feel like I was rejoining the world. I went to book club. I went to painting class. I started taking morning walks at the local park, nodding at the other regulars. I wasn't dating, wasn't even considering it, but I was living, just a little bit more each day. Then, 6 months after that first book club meeting, Delphine brought it up again. Dad, she said, settling onto my couch with the determination of someone about to say something uncomfortable. I want you to consider trying one of those dating sites. No. Just hear me out. Delphine, I said no. I'm not interested. I'm doing better, aren't I? I'm going to book club. I'm painting. You're socializing. That's wonderful. But Dad, when was the last time you felt alive? Really alive? When was the last time your heart beat faster because of someone? When you looked forward to seeing a specific person? When you felt that flutter of excitement? I didn't answer because I knew exactly when it had been. It had been with Constance, and she was gone. I'm too old for that, I finally said. That kind of feeling, that kind of love, it's for young people. I had my chance. I had my great love. And now you can have another one, a different one. Not better or worse, just different. What if I don't want different? What if I just want to remember what I had? Delphine's eyes filled with tears. Then you'll forget how to live. And Mom didn't die so that you could stop living. Her words haunted me for days. And finally, late one Sunday night, sitting alone in my study with a glass of whiskey I wasn't really drinking, I opened my laptop and typed dating sites for seniors into the search bar. The screen filled with options. Silver singles, our time, senior match. The names alone made me feel ancient, but I clicked on one and began reading. It took me 3 days to create a profile. 3 days of writing and deleting, of choosing and changing photos, of feeling ridiculous and vulnerable and terrified. What do you say about yourself when you're 67 and haven't dated in over 40 years? How do you summarize a life, a career, a marriage, a loss? In the end, I kept it simple. My name is Thaddeus. I'm 67, a retired architect, a father and grandfather. I've been widowed for 3 years. I love reading, terrible amateur painting, long walks, and good conversation. I don't know what I'm looking for, but I'm willing to find out. I added 3 photos. One from Marcus's wedding 2 years ago, where I'm smiling in a suit. One from the garden, where I'm wearing my ridiculous sun hat. And one from a family dinner, where I'm laughing at something one of my grandchildren said. Then, before I could change my mind, I clicked submit and immediately felt like I'd made a terrible mistake. The first week was overwhelming. My profile received dozens of likes and messages, and I had no idea how to respond. Some women seemed lovely, but wrote essays in their first message. Others sent just hi or a winking emoji. A few were clearly scammers. One claimed to be a 55-year-old surgeon who needed help accessing her inheritance in Nigeria. I called Delphine in a panic. I can't do this. There are too many people. How do you know who's real? How do you know what to say? She laughed, but not unkindly. Dad, you're overthinking it. Just respond to the ones who seem interesting. Have a conversation. It's not that different from meeting someone at a party. Except I can't read their body language or see if they're actually listening or notice if they have kind eyes. So suggest meeting for coffee. That's what people do. But the idea of meeting a stranger for coffee, a stranger from the internet, felt absurd and frightening. What would we talk about? What if there was no chemistry? What if I'd forgotten how to be charming or interesting? What if she expected something I couldn't give? I responded to a few messages tentatively. Most conversations fizzled after a few exchanges. We'd established that yes, we both enjoyed reading. And yes, the weather had been lovely. And yes, wasn't it strange to be doing this at our age? And then we'd run out of things to say. But then I received a message from someone named Audeline. Hello, Thaddeus, it read. I appreciated your honesty about not knowing what you're looking for. I don't either. I've been widowed for 4 years, and my children finally convinced me to try this. I'm 64, a retired librarian, and I spend too much time with mystery novels and not enough time with actual people. Your profile made me smile, specifically the part about terrible amateur painting. I'm sure mine would give yours a run for its money. If you're interested in swapping stories about our artistic inadequacies over coffee, let me know. No pressure. Best, Audeline. I read her message 3 times. There was something about her tone. Self-deprecating but not desperate. Warm but not overeager. Honest about the strangeness of the situation. I clicked on her profile. Her photo showed a woman with shoulder-length gray hair, glasses, a warm smile. In one, she was sitting in what looked like a library, surrounded by books. In another, she was at the beach, looking windblown and happy. In the third, she was with 2 younger people who I assumed were her children, all of them laughing at something off camera. I spent 20 minutes crafting a response. Dear Audeline, I would very much enjoy swapping inadequate painting stories over coffee. I should warn you that my apples look like potatoes and my landscapes resemble abstract expressionism gone wrong. When are you free? Thaddeus. Her response came quickly. How about Saturday afternoon? There's a nice cafe called the Cornerstone on Maple Street. 2 p.m.? I agreed before I could talk myself out of it. Then I spent the next 4 days in a state of low-level panic. On Saturday morning, I changed clothes 4 times. Too formal, too casual, too much like I was trying too hard, too much like I hadn't tried at all. I finally settled on khakis and a button-down shirt with a sweater. What Constance used to call my professor look. I arrived at the Cornerstone 15 minutes early, which gave me plenty of time to second-guess everything. What if she didn't show up? What if she did show up and was disappointed? What if I had nothing to say? What if I said something stupid? At 1:58, a woman walked in, looked around, and caught my eye. She smiled uncertainly, and I stood, my heart doing something uncomfortable in my chest. Thaddeus? Audeline? We shook hands awkwardly, then both ordered coffee. Black for me, latte for her, and settled at a corner table. The first 10 minutes were excruciating. We stumbled through the basics, where we lived, both in nearby neighborhoods, what we'd done for work. I talked about architecture, she talked about libraries, how many children and grandchildren we had. 2 and 4 for me, 1 and 2 for her. Then there was a lull, and I could feel panic rising. This wasn't working. We had nothing to say to each other. This whole thing had been a mistake. So, Audeline said, wrapping her hands around her cup, tell me about your terrible paintings. And somehow, that broke the ice. I told her about painting class, about Geraldine and our mutual incompetence, about how my bowl of fruit looked like vegetables from another planet. She laughed, really laughed, and told me about her own attempts at watercolors, how everything she painted turned into a muddy brown mess. My daughter suggested I was using too much water, she said. I pointed out that they were called watercolors for a reason. She did not find that as funny as I did. From there, the conversation flowed more easily. We talked about books. She'd read everything. I felt like a novice in comparison. We talked about our children's concern about our social lives, about the strangeness of dating websites, about the vulnerability of putting yourself out there at an age when you thought you were done with all that. My son helped me set up my profile, she said. He was very patient, but I could tell he found the whole thing both sad and amusing. At one point he said, Mom, you need better photos. These make you look like a librarian. I said, I am a librarian. He said, but you don't have to look like one. What did you do? I used the photos anyway. I am a librarian, or was. I'm not going to pretend to be someone else. I liked that. My daughter wrote my profile for me initially. I rewrote it 3 times because she kept making me sound more interesting than I am. You seem pretty interesting to me. That simple statement, delivered with a shy smile, made my chest warm. We talked for 2 hours. When I finally looked at my watch, I was shocked. It had felt like 20 minutes. I should let you go, I said reluctantly. I suppose you should, she said. But she didn't stand up immediately. Outside the cafe, we stood awkwardly on the sidewalk. I hadn't been on a first date in 43 years. I had no idea how to end this. I really enjoyed talking with you, I said. I did too, she hesitated. Would you like to do this again? Relief flooded through me. Yes, very much yes. Good, she smiled, and I noticed she had a dimple in her left cheek. How about next week? There's a small art exhibit at the library. It's local artists, probably not very good, but it might be fun to look at paintings that are worse than ours. I laughed. That sounds perfect. As I drove home, I felt something I hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope, and also terror. Because hope meant possibility, and possibility meant risk, and risk meant the chance of loss again. but I'd said yes to another date. And that felt like the beginning of something. Over the next 3 months, Adeline and I fell into a pattern. We'd meet once or twice a week, for coffee, for walks in the park, for the art exhibit that was indeed delightfully terrible, for a matinee showing of a film adaptation of a book she loved. We took things slowly, at a pace that felt right for two people who'd been married to others for decades, who'd loved and lost, who approached new relationships with both hope and caution. I learned that Adeline had been married to a man named Bernard for 37 years, that he died suddenly of a heart attack while raking leaves in their backyard, that she'd found him there, that she'd performed CPR until the paramedics arrived, that she still couldn't walk past the spot in the yard without feeling sick. She learned that Constance and I had known about the cancer for 9 months before she died, that we'd had time to prepare, if you can ever really prepare for such a thing, that I'd been holding her hand when she took her last breath, that I still sometimes reached for her in the middle of the night. We cried together, which was a gift. We laughed together, which was a miracle. But we also struggled with what this was, what it meant, how to move forward. After about 2 months, Adeline brought it up over dinner at a small Italian restaurant. "Thaddeus," she said, setting down her fork, "I need to be honest with you about something." My stomach dropped. Here it came. She'd realized she wasn't interested. This had been a mistake. She wanted to be friends, but nothing more. "I really care about you," she said. "These past couple months have been wonderful. You're kind and funny and thoughtful, and I look forward to our time together more than I've looked forward to anything in years." "But," I prompted, hearing the unspoken word, "but I'm scared," she admitted. "I'm scared of caring too much. I'm scared of losing someone again. I'm scared that I'm betraying Bernard's memory, even though logically I know that's not true. I'm scared that at 64, I don't have the energy for heartbreak again." I reached across the table and took her hand. "I'm scared too," I said. "I'm terrified, actually. Every time I start to feel something deeper for you, there's a voice in my head that says, 'What are you doing? You're too old for this. You'll just get hurt. Why risk it?' So what do we do? I don't know. But I know that I'd rather be scared with you than safe without you, if that makes any sense." She squeezed my hand. It makes perfect sense. But knowing we were both scared didn't make the fear go away. It just meant we were scared together. The complications multiplied. There were practical questions. At our age, with our established lives, what did a relationship even look like? Did we merge households or keep our separate spaces? Did we introduce each other to our friends and families as boyfriend and girlfriend? Words that felt absurd at our age. And there were deeper questions. How do you love someone new without comparing them to your late spouse? How do you honor the past while building a future? How do you navigate physical intimacy after decades with one person? When your body is older? When everything feels simultaneously more precious and more vulnerable? 3 months in, Adeline suggested we meet each other's children. "I think we should," she said. "If this is going to be something real, they should know." I agreed, but with trepidation. I told Delphine and Marcus that I was seeing someone, and they've been supportive, enthusiastic even, but I hadn't told them much about Adeline, partly because I was private by nature, partly because I wasn't sure what there was to tell. We decided to start with my children. I invited them and their families for Sunday dinner, warning them that I'd be bringing someone. Delphine arrived early, ostensibly to help cook, but really to interrogate me. "Tell me about her," she demanded, chopping vegetables with aggressive precision. "Her name is Adeline. She's 64, a retired librarian. She's kind and smart and funny. We met on that dating site you insisted I join. And what's she like? Are you happy? Does she make you smile?" "She makes me very happy. And yes, she makes me smile." Delphine stopped chopping and hugged me. Good. That's all I wanted to know. When Adeline arrived, I saw her take a deep breath before getting out of her car. She was nervous too, which somehow made me less nervous. Dinner was actually wonderful. Adeline was nervous at first, answering questions about her work and her children with careful politeness. But then my grandson, 7-year-old Jasper, asked her what her favorite book was. "Oh, that's impossible to answer," she said, her whole face lighting up. "It's like asking which of your favorite days was the best. But if I had to pick just one, probably To Kill a Mockingbird." "We read that in school," Jasper exclaimed. "Well, my teacher read it to us. I liked Boo Radley." And just like that, Adeline and Jasper were deep in conversation about books and characters and scary scenes that weren't really that scary. She treated him like an equal, listening to his opinions seriously, asking thoughtful questions. Later, as we were clearing dishes, Delphine pulled me aside. "She's lovely, Dad. Really lovely. And the way she talked to Jasper, Mom would have liked her." The mention of Constance made my chest tighten, but in a different way than usual. Not painful exactly. More like bittersweet. "You think so?" "I know so. Mom always said that kindness was the most important thing. Adeline is kind. You can see it in everything she does." The following week, I met Adeline's son Dashiell and his family. If anything, I was more nervous. I was the new man in his mother's life, the person who wasn't his father. I expected resentment, or at least suspicion, but Dashiell greeted me warmly. "My mom talks about you constantly," he said. "Thaddeus this, Thaddeus that. You're clearly making her happy, and that's all I care about." Over lunch, he told me stories about his father, about Bernard. I could have felt uncomfortable, the new partner meeting the shadow of the old one, but instead I felt grateful. Bernard was part of Adeline's story, part of who she was. To ignore that would be to ignore an essential part of her. "My father would have liked you," Dashiell said at one point. "He always said Mom needed someone who could keep up with her mind, who could debate books with her. He'd be glad she found that again." After we left, in Adeline's car, she let out a long breath. "Well, that went better than I feared." "They loved you," I said. "My children loved you. Your grandchildren loved me. Your children were polite and assessing." "They loved you," I repeated. "Delphine told me so." She smiled. "Dashiell told me to keep you around. He said you seemed steady. I think that was his way of giving his blessing." We drove in comfortable silence for a while. Then she said, "Thaddeus, thank you." "For what?" "For being patient with me. With this. I know I've been hesitant, that I've taken things slowly, that I've been guarded. Thank you for not pushing. We're both figuring this out," I said. "There's no rush." But even as I said it, I felt the truth of our situation. At our age, time was precious. We didn't have decades stretching before us. We had now, and whatever years we were lucky enough to get. That was terrifying and liberating in equal measure. 6 months after that first coffee date, Adeline and I took our first trip together. A weekend at a bed and breakfast 2 hours north in wine country. I was nervous for a dozen reasons. We'd be together constantly for 3 days. We'd be sharing a room. Separate beds, we'd agreed. But still, there would be no escape if things became uncomfortable. But I needn't have worried. The weekend was easy. We drove with the windows down, talking and laughing. We visited wineries and pretended to understand descriptions like notes of black currant with a hint of cedar. We walked through small towns, browsing antique shops and bookstores. We had long dinners where we talked about everything and nothing. And on the second night, sitting on the porch of the B&B watching the sunset, Adeline took my hand. "I love you," she said quietly. I wasn't going to say it. It seemed too soon, or too risky, or too something. But I do. I love you. Thaddeus. My eyes filled with tears. "I love you too." "I know it's different," she continued. "I know it's not the same as what we had with our spouses. It's not meant to be. But it's real and it's ours. And I'm tired of being afraid of it." I pulled her close, and we sat there as the sky turned pink and orange and purple. Two people who'd thought their stories were over, discovering that there were still chapters to write. That night, we made love for the first time. It was tender and awkward and beautiful. Our bodies were older, less certain, marked by time and loss, but we were gentle with each other, patient, finding our way in the dark. Afterward, lying next to her, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel again. Complete. But loving someone at our age came with challenges that younger people don't face. Our bodies betrayed us in small and large ways. I had arthritis in my hands that made them ache on cold days. Adeline had high blood pressure that required daily medication. We both took afternoon naps sometimes, not out of laziness, but out of genuine need. There were harder conversations too, about healthcare directives and wills, about what would happen if one of us got seriously ill, about how we'd navigate the inevitable decline that comes with age. "I don't want you to have to take care of me," Adeline said one evening. "If something happens, if I get sick or can't take care of myself, then I'll be there," I interrupted. "That's what this means. That's what love means. But you already did that once, with Constance. You were her caretaker at the end. I can't ask you to do that again." "You're not asking. I'm offering. I'm choosing. Just like you'd choose to be there for me if our situations were reversed." She was quiet for a long moment. "I would," she finally said. "I would absolutely be there for you. But I hope neither of us has to do that for a long time." Agreed. There were complications with our children too. Not big ones, but small moments of awkwardness. The question of holidays, where would we spend them? Together? Separately with our own families? Divided between them? The question of memory. Was it okay to tell stories about Bernard and Constance? Or did that make the other person feel like a replacement, a second choice? The question of possessions. Constance's wedding ring still sat in my drawer. Bernard's watch still sat in Adeline's. What did we do with these relics of our past loves? We navigated these questions together, sometimes gracefully, sometimes clumsily. We decided that holidays would be fluid, some together, some apart, depending on what made sense. We decided that talking about our late spouses was not only okay, but necessary. They were part of our stories, and to exclude them would be to deny who we were. We decided that the rings and watches and other mementos would stay where they were, honored and remembered, but not worshipped. But the biggest challenge was internal, learning to let go of guilt. I felt guilty for being happy, for laughing, for feeling the flutter of excitement when Adeline called. I felt like I was betraying Constance's memory, replacing her, moving on too quickly, even though it had been 3 years. Adeline felt the same about Bernard. She'd apologize sometimes after we'd had a wonderful day together, as if happiness were something to be ashamed of. It took time and several conversations to work through this. We had to give each other permission to be happy, to love again, to believe that we deserve this second chapter. "Constance loved you," Adeline said one evening. "From everything you've told me, she loved you deeply. Don't you think she'd want you to be happy?" I know she would. Rationally, I know that. But it still feels like betrayal sometimes. I understand. I feel it too. But maybe the real betrayal would be refusing to live fully, refusing to love again just because they're gone. Maybe honoring them means taking the love they gave us and using it to love again. Love better, love more deeply. I thought about that for a long time, and slowly I began to believe it. A year after that first coffee date, Adeline and I stood in front of our families and a small gathering of friends in the garden that Constance and I had planted together. We were getting married. It had been Adeline's idea, surprisingly. "I know it seems old-fashioned," she'd said, "or maybe unnecessary at our age. But I want to be your wife, Thaddeus. I want that commitment, that promise, that public declaration." "I want that too," I'd admitted. I didn't think I did, but I do. We kept the ceremony simple. No white dress or tuxedo, just nice clothes, a few readings, some vows we wrote ourselves. When it was my turn to speak, I looked at Adeline and said, I never thought I'd stand here again. I thought that part of my life was over, that I'd had my great love and my time was done. You proved me wrong. You taught me that the heart is more resilient than we think, that love doesn't diminish with age, it deepens. You taught me that starting over isn't betrayal, it's courage. I promise to love you fully, to honor both our pasts while building our future, to be gentle with your fears and patient with mine, to laugh with you, cry with you, and hold your hand through whatever comes. I'm 70 years old, and you've made me feel like life is just beginning. Adeline's vows were equally beautiful, equally tearful, and when we kissed, our children and grandchildren and friends applauded, and I felt Constance's blessing like sunshine on my face. Now, 3 years after meeting Adeline, I want to share what I've learned about love after 60, because if you're reading this or listening to this, perhaps you're where I was, alone, afraid, convinced your story is over. Let me tell you, it's not. First lesson, it's never too late. I was 67 when I met Adeline. 67. I thought I was too old for romance, too set in my ways, too tired. I was wrong. Age brings challenges, yes, but it also brings wisdom, patience, and the knowledge of what really matters. Second lesson, different doesn't mean better or worse. Loving Adeline is different from loving Constance. It's not more or less, it's simply different. Different rhythms, different conversations, different ways of being together. I don't compare them because that would be unfair to everyone, including myself. Third lesson, be honest about your fears. I was terrified of dating again, terrified of being vulnerable, terrified of loss. Adeline felt the same way, but we talked about it, openly and honestly. We didn't pretend to be braver than we were. That honesty became the foundation of our relationship. Fourth lesson, take it slow. There's no rush. At our age, we understand that relationships are built in moments, not milestones. We took months to say I love you. We took a year to get married. We let things unfold naturally, without forcing them into a timeline that didn't fit who we were. Fifth lesson, your late spouse is not your competition. This was hard for both of us to learn. We kept comparing ourselves to Bernard and Constance, worried we weren't measuring up. But they're not our competition. They're part of our stories. A good partner will honor your past, not resent it. Sixth lesson, your children's opinions matter, but they're not everything. We were fortunate that our children supported us. But even if they hadn't, we would have moved forward. At 60 plus, you've earned the right to make your own choices, to prioritize your happiness, to live the rest of your life on your terms. Seventh lesson, physical intimacy looks different, and that's okay. Our bodies are older. Things don't work the way they used to. But intimacy isn't just physical. It's holding hands during a movie. It's a gentle touch on the shoulder. It's lying in bed talking until you fall asleep. It's all the small moments of connection that make you feel less alone. Eighth lesson, practical matters are romantic too. Talking about wills and healthcare directives isn't sexy, but it's necessary. And there's something deeply romantic about someone wanting to make sure you're taken care of, about planning a future together, even when that future is uncertain. Ninth lesson, let go of guilt. This is perhaps the hardest lesson. You're not betraying your late spouse by loving again. You're honoring the capacity for love they helped develop in you. You're proving that what you built together was strong enough to teach you how to love, even after loss. 10th lesson, every day is a gift. At our age, we know this isn't just a platitude. It's truth. We don't know how many years we have together. Adeline and I might have 20 years, or 10, or 5. We might have just one. But whatever time we have, we're choosing to spend it together, choosing joy over fear, choosing connection over safety, choosing love. Today, Adeline and I are sitting in the garden. It's different now. We've added new plants, new pathways, new places to sit. But the bones of what Constance and I built are still here, growing alongside what Adeline and I have created. That's what life after 60 looks like, I think. The past and present, intertwined like the roses and honeysuckle climbing the fence. Not erasing what came before, but adding to it, building on it, letting it evolve into something new. I'm 70 years old. My hands shake sometimes. My knees hurt when it rains. I can't remember where I put my glasses half the time. But I'm happy. Deeply, surprisingly, wonderfully happy. Because I took a risk. Because I said yes when every part of me wanted to say no. Because I let my daughter push me into creating that ridiculous dating profile. Because I showed up at that cafe even though I was terrified. Because I allowed myself to be vulnerable with a woman who was just as scared as I was. If you're listening to this and you're alone, if you've lost someone and think your story is over, if you're afraid to try it again, I understand. I was you. But I'm here to tell you that your story isn't over. There are still chapters to be written, still people to meet, still love to be found. It won't look like it did when you were young. It will be slower, gentler, marked by afternoon naps and medication schedules and conversations about mortality. But it will be real. And it will be worth it. The heart, I've learned, doesn't have an expiration date. It keeps beating, keeps hoping, keeps opening itself to possibility. All you have to do is let it. Adeline just brought me a cup of tea. She's settling into the chair beside me, taking my hand, smiling at something she's reading in her book. The afternoon light is golden, the garden is blooming, and I am loved. At 70, I am loved. And if that's not a miracle, I don't know what is. Before I close, let me leave you with some practical advice. The things I wish someone had told me when I was sitting alone in my study, staring at that dating website, too scared to click submit. On creating your profile, be yourself. Don't try to sound younger or more exciting than you are. The right person will appreciate your authenticity. Include recent photos. No glamour shots from 20 years ago. You want someone who will love you as you are now. On first dates, choose public places where you can talk. Coffee shops, quiet restaurants, parks. Don't go to movies or concerts for first dates. You need to be able to converse. And give it a chance. Sometimes chemistry takes time to develop. But also trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. On rejection, you will be rejected. You will reject others. This is part of the process. Don't take it personally. Not everyone is meant to be together, and that's okay. Every no brings you closer to the right yes. On moving forward, there's no timeline for grief, and there's no timeline for when you should start dating again. Some people are ready after a year. Others need 5 years or more. Listen to yourself, not to others' expectations. On comparisons, you will compare your new partner to your late spouse. This is natural, but try to catch yourself doing it and stop. Each person deserves to be loved for who they are, not judged against who someone else was. On vulnerability. Being vulnerable at 60 plus is harder than being vulnerable at 20. We have more to lose, more scars, more fear. But vulnerability is the price of connection. You can't have deep love without deep vulnerability. On physical intimacy, talk about it. Don't assume. Be patient with yourself and your partner. Bodies change, needs change, and that's okay. Intimacy is about connection, not performance. On merging lives, you don't have to move in together or merge finances or do any of the traditional relationship things if they don't feel right. At our age, we have the freedom to create relationships that work for us, whatever that looks like. On dealing with adult children, they may struggle with seeing you with someone new. Be patient with them. Give them time to adjust. But also be clear that this is your life and your choice. Most children, ultimately, want their parents to be happy. On honoring the past, create rituals that honor your late spouse while making room for your new partner. Visit the cemetery on important dates if that feels right. Share stories about your past, but also create new traditions, new memories, new stories. On hope, don't give up. I almost did, dozens of times. After bad dates, after awkward conversations, after moments of doubt and fear. But I kept trying, and I found Audalyn. Your person is out there. You just have to be brave enough to look. Final thoughts. I'm 70 years old, and I'm sitting in my garden with my wife. Not my first wife, my second. My Audalyn. And I'm happy. I never thought I'd say those words. I thought happiness died with Constance. I thought I'd had my time, my chance, my great love story. I was wrong. Life, it turns out, has more than one story to tell, more than one chapter, more than one chance at love. All you have to do is be brave enough to turn the page. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it gives you courage. I hope it gives you hope. I hope it reminds you that it's never too late to begin again. The sun is setting now, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Audalyn is asking me what I want for dinner. My grandchildren will be visiting tomorrow. There are books to read and paintings to attempt and long walks to take and conversations to have and years, however many we're blessed with, to live. And I plan to live them all, fully and gratefully, with this woman beside me who was brave enough to say yes to coffee with a stranger, who was patient enough to wait while I found my courage, who was kind enough to love an old man who thought his heart was too broken to love again. She proved me wrong. And I've never been happier to be wrong about anything in my life. That's my story. The story of Thaddeus Merritt, a 70-year-old man who found love after 60, who learned that the heart has no expiration date, who discovered that happy endings can come more than once if you're brave enough to reach for them. Now go write your own story. I promise you, it's not too late. It's never too late.